Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. This is episode 220, and today we'll be covering the NFL free agency moves that we didn't get to in our last free agency episode about a week and a half ago, or maybe less than that. A lot has happened since then. We're just going to be covering all of the big moves that happened in between then and now. And giving all of our takeaways and talking about what it means, big picture, for all these different teams. But before we get into it, leave a like on the video, subscribe if you're new. We do content like this at NFL, MLB, you name it. We also have another podcast called Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. So if you're a Longhorns fan, that's another thing you can turn into on this channel. So join the fam, subscribe. We'd appreciate that a lot. But let's get into the content. Joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. McElwain. How you doing?
What a time it is to be alive if you are a fan of any sport, particularly the NFL. This offseason has been nuts so far. It's lived up to my expectations and more. And we're going to cover most of the big moves that have happened since Monday when we last did our tampering period episode to cover all the moves that happened pre the actual league new year beginning. This is our first episode in the 2024 NFL League New Year, which officially started, what was it, Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah.
I forget. All the days have run together at this point. But not only that, we're on the eve. We're less than 24 hours away from the NCAA tournament selection show and finding out who's going to play where, who's going to play who, in what will be one of the wildest spans of 3 weeks you will find in sports over the next 3 weeks, March Madness. I'm super excited for that. We've had some bid stealers already in these conference tournaments. NC State downs Carolina tonight to steal a bid in the ACC. The Cardiac Pack are back. Watch out for the Wolf Pack as they are hot at the right time. Sometimes that's all it takes, but I still expect, with Tennessee losing earlier in their conference tournament, Arizona losing earlier than I thought in their conference tournament, I still expect, with all that being said, Carolina to steal that last number one seed. But that's all beside the point. We're going to do a bracket show on Monday night around 8 p.m. So be there or be square. Let's get into the NFL.
Yeah, let's do this, man. First move on the docket, Brian Burns, man, gets sent to the New York Giants for a second and a fifth round pick. I mean, I know some Giants fans, they were hitting me up after this move went down. Huge move for that organization. I'll start with this. I mean, just from a philosophical standpoint, just building a football team, just blank slate like the Giants were 2 years ago when they brought in their new general manager after Gettleman. From a just the standpoint of, you want a calling card, you want something to build your football team around, and I think they're starting to do that finally. Their D line is going to be the identity of that defense. Brian Burns, and then of course you have Dexter Lawrence on the interior, who is arguably the best defensive tackle in football, with Aaron Donald retiring here recently, which we'll get into later. And then of course a young third-year guy in Kayvon Thibodeaux on the other side, who is comparable to a young Brian Burns and has a lot of those physical traits that Brian Burns has. So not only are you getting a mentor from that aspect, but also you're finally pairing a elite guy next to Dexter Lawrence, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see in terms of the stunts they can pull off, and just the amount of pressure they're going to get with their front four is going to be so much better than what it's been in past years.
This is a massive win for the New York Giants. As part of this trade, where the the Giants and the Panthers, a 2024 second round pick, and a 2025 next year 5th round pick, while they also swap 2024 5th rounders as part of this deal. The Giants sign Brian Burns to a 5-year, $141 million extension with $76 million guaranteed. So they lock him up for the next 5 years on what is a perfectly reasonable deal for an edge rusher that's been super productive. I'll get to that in a second, but is only 25 years old and is just like entering or is in the start of his prime. A player who plays a premium position. This is massive for the Giants. You add him to what you already have on that defensive front, and I love it. I've been advocating for Brian Burns since his days in Carolina, but if you look at the way that he's produced since he came into the league in 2016, you probably don't put him on the tier 1 pedestal of pass rushers in today's NFL. I wouldn't, but there's something to be said about this. Players to have 7.5 sacks in each of their first 5 seasons in the league. Reggie White, Hall of Famer, one of the best pass rushers of all time. Derek Thomas, Hall of Famer. DeMarcus Ware. You know about DeMarcus Ware better than anybody. Hall of Famer. Jared Allen, really good pass rusher, really good player in his day. We'll see where he goes. Aaron Donald, who just retired and is a future first ballot Hall of Famer. We'll talk about that later. Ryan Kerrigan, who was an excellent player for Washington for a long time. And then Yannick Ngakoue. You add now Brian Burns into that equation. I'm not comparing him to any of those guys, especially the Hall of Famers or Aaron Donald, but there is something to be said about how productive he's been in his first 5 years. He's young. He plays a premium position. You get him at a perfectly reasonable deal, about $28 million per year. I mean, that's the premium you have to pay to get one of these dudes that gets after the passer. And now you're set pretty much with a pretty damn good pass rush. You talked about Kayvon Thibodeau, who you just drafted a couple years ago, and you have other guys that can get the job done. But the best thing I like about this is that he's still really young. He's 25. I believe he'll be 26 when the season begins. Excellent move for the Giants. I give it an A.
Yeah. There's really no reason not to. The other side of this, though, you got the Panthers, of course, giving up their star pass rusher for not incredible value. Definitely not. They didn't have much leverage, but just from a cap space standpoint, I think switching resources from defense to offense is necessary right now because you're trying to figure out what Bryce Young is. And obviously there was a big deficit in talent between what you had on defense and what you had on offense last year. And right now you can worry about the defense, in the future down the line, like rebuilding that. But right now you got to figure out what Bryce Young is. Going into year 3, you need to have a better picture of who Bryce Young is and whether he's, or at least be a little bit more confident that he's your guy going into year 3.
Yeah, and to add on to that just a little bit, look, I kind of have my questions about whether or not they should have given Brian Burns this deal, but I understand there might have been some hesitation on their end to invest too much money into the defense when they're trying to develop a new rookie quarterback with, once again, a new coach in Carolina. That's an offensive mind. I totally understand that. But I have liked some of the other moves that they have made, specifically getting Robert Hunt, the guard from the Miami Dolphins, who's an experienced, solid guy who they can plug in at one of their guard spots to improve that offensive line. He's at least an upgrade over what they've had in the past. And then trading for Deontay Johnson to pair with DJ Moore. I'm not sure if you saw that move, but they did trade for Deontay Johnson, who at the very least is an excellent route runner, gets open, and has been a productive player for the Steelers, even though he hasn't necessarily had the volume and the touchdowns that you would expect. I think he will go very, very well with Bryce Young. And if he plays well this year and he elevates that offense, you give him the extension.
Right.
So
Exactly.
I do like some of the moves that they've made offensively, but it sucks to lose a 25-year-old pass rusher, the level of Brian Burns, who ranks 12th in sacks and quarterback hits with 99 since 2019.
Yeah, and it does really hurt. But I think the good news, if you're a Panthers fan, is that I think there's clearly a long term vision here, and it's not like the DeAndre Hopkins deal from the Texans to the Cardinals a few years back. So I saw some people on Twitter comparing it to that, but it's really not that at all. I really just think they're trying to, prioritize offensive assets right now. And that's been made clear by them going for Deontay Johnson, like you said, and then also paying big money for at both guard spots.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move gears to our next move we have on our rundown, and that is Derrick Henry signing, I believe it's a 2-year, $20 million contract with the Baltimore Ravens. What are your initial thoughts on King Henry in Baltimore?
I mean, there's not really much to say other than this running game is going to be picked up a level. I mean, I think Derrick Henry still has a lot left in the tank. I saw a stat earlier today that was basically saying Derrick Henry was, I think, last in the league in yards before contact, yet he was still top 10 in the league in yards. And the Ravens running back room were first in the league in yards before contact, which is, indicative of how good their blocking was. Obviously, they did lose a few offensive linemen in Baltimore, but I still think with how well that running game is designed with Mike McDonald, I just think they're going to find ways to get Derrick Henry going. And I think that's the exciting part, is that Derrick Henry is going somewhere where he's going to be able to gain a head of steam like we haven't seen in a few years.
Yeah, you're talking about a guy who not only has the second most broken tackles in the NFL as a running back since 2019, just behind Najee Harris, but he also leads the NFL, and it's not particularly close, in rushing touchdowns since 2019 with 58. Next closest would be Josh Jacobs, who, of course, got signed to the Packers this offseason. And then Josh Allen, who's a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, as you guys well know. Actually, fourth on that list, still since 2019, in rushing touchdowns, is Ezekiel Elliott with 43. He's tied with Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey, which is kind of surprises me, but
Yeah.
hey, good for Zeke. But let me correct myself. It's actually a 2-year, $16 million deal. So even better. You get him for $8 million. He's ultra productive. He's got plenty left in the tank. This guy never gets hurt, knock on wood. And, you look at his 2023 stats behind what was a subpar offensive line, to put it lightly. Played in all 17 games, rushed for almost 1,200 yards, had over 200 receiving yards, averaged 80 yards from scrimmage, and probably could have averaged more if he was playing in better surroundings like he will be in Baltimore, and rushed for 12 touchdowns. He has 10 or more touchdowns in each of the last 6 seasons. Nobody else really comes close to that. We love King Henry, both you and I, because some of the jokes that have come from it, but also he's just a fantastic player. And he's going to look really, really good in that shade of purple. I hate to say it as a Steeler fan, but he's going to look really, really good next to Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
That run game is going to be nutty.
Yeah, that's going to be crazy. It'll be interesting to see whether they go into under center run game more because out of shotgun, it may not be as comfortable for Derrick Henry. I think he'll still be productive regardless, but we'll see what happens with that.
And one more thing, not that the Ravens haven't been good in the red zone. In fact, I think when you look statistically, Lamar Jackson, since he came into the league, has been one of the better, like, elite quarterbacks in the red zone. And so they're not that their red zone offense has been bad. It's actually been good. But now, don't overthink it. When you're down at the goal line, you don't have to overthink anything. Just give it to number – I don't know what number he's going to wear in Baltimore, but I assume it'd be the same, number 22 in the backfield with those dreads. Just give it to him. And most of the time, 99% of the time, I guarantee you're going to get in the end zone.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else on Henry?
No, I don't think. I think that's it.
What
I
grade do you
just think the Ravens, they continue to be aggressive. It's going to be another year where they're in contention for sure. I think this free agency solidified that.
What grade do you give it? 2 years, $16 million for Henry.
I mean, it's low risk, high reward. I'd probably give it a B plus, A minus.
I'm right there with you. I give it that too. Okay. We've come to the part of the show where we're going to have a little bit of fun for good reason. This week has been chaos. If you are a fan of one particular franchise in the state of Pennsylvania, not named the Philadelphia Eagles, named the Pittsburgh Steelers. Omar Khan has completely blown my mind with what he's been able to do in just a short time period. And we'll get to all that here in a second. But what move do you want to start with? Like, we kind of talked about the Steelers trading away Deontay Johnson, and they need now 2 receivers. They still have holes to fill, no question about it. They need a right tackle. They need a center. It looks like more and more likely like they're going to probably address that in the draft. I think there are some other positions. I still think they could use another corner, even though they get Dante Jackson back in the Deontay trade. But they have filled a couple of major needs, and they've upgraded at a major position. Let's start on the defense, because that's what Pittsburgh is. They are clearly, or have been at least, a defensive culture. And they go out as free agency opens, and they get Patrick Queen. 3 years, $41 million. What is your reaction to the Steelers adding Patrick Queen to the middle of this defense?
Well, for one, I like him at that price tag. I think pre-free agency, you would have thought, Patrick Queen would ask for, the Tremaine Edmonds type of number, where he would be Tremaine Edmonds is making, $18 million a year in Chicago. Pittsburgh ends up getting Patrick Queen. I think it's for 12 or 13 million. Pretty sure. Really good value, and I also just think the step forward that he made when Roquan Smith got into the building. Obviously, you give some credit to Roquan Smith, but I just think it also, they also aren't giving enough credit to him and just him putting in the work, because clearly the step forward that he made wasn't just Roquan Smith coming in. Clearly he had the talent all along, and he just needed that extra bit of, I think, professionalism that Roquan brought in, and him implementing that and now bringing that to the Steelers. I think he's ready to go to be the number 1 linebacker.
Yeah, I love this move. First of all, anytime you can get a second-team All-Pro caliber player, which is what Patrick Queen was a year ago, from your biggest rival to your team to plug a major hole in your defense, that's obviously a win. But when you look at Patrick Queen, I absolutely agree. I thought he was going to go for more. I didn't expect a splash move like this from Pittsburgh in free agency, although they did major work to clear up cap space before the tampering period opened. Like they got rid of a lot of unproductive players. And of course, they had a lot of free agents. I really like this move. I still have a question about whether or not he'll be as productive as he was in Baltimore, given the Steelers don't have a Roquan Smith beside him. But I do think he's going to plug a major hole. He's the most athletic, best, most productive linebacker that the Steelers have had probably since Ryan Shazier and that whole fiasco. They've tried so many options that just haven't worked out due to injury or just bad football. And now you have a linebacker room where you have Patrick Queen, you pair him with Landon Roberts behind this defensive front. I really like it. I mean, there's not really a whole lot else I can say. I can bring and bore you guys with all the stats. But the bottom line is for $13.7 million a year, I will take a second team All-Pro from a year ago and plug him into the middle of my defense, which already has Joey Porter Jr., which already has Minkah Fitzpatrick, which already has Highsmith and Watt, which already has Cam Hayward. The Steelers just continue to add to that defense, which I like. And if this defense plays up to its standard, it is a championship caliber defense. Now, let's talk about the offense. Today, the news broke that the Steelers are trading for Justin Fields. Obviously, they already brought in Russell Wilson on a vet min. Broncos paying $38 million for him to play for Pittsburgh. They now bring in Justin Fields for a 2025 conditional 6th-round pick. It's kind of nuts when you think about it. And now you think about Pittsburgh's quarterback room, where it was and where it is now. Just what are your overall thoughts, number one, on the Fields trade? And number two, going from Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, and Mitch Trubisky to Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Because I can tell you this, for about ever since the Steelers were knocked out of the playoffs by Buffalo, the debate has been, do you get Russ or do you trade for Fields? And now they have both of them. So just your initial thoughts.
Well, I think after you sign Russ to $1.2 million, which is probably less than a lot of people anticipated, like even with, him making whatever, $40 million from the Broncos or whatever it is, I think a lot of people were still anticipating Russ to sign for $5 to $8 million, which is what, some backups are getting. But you getting him for $1.2 million is, I think, what allowed you to be like, okay, we have this flexibility. And I think the Justin Fields move was necessary. I think Justin Fields being able to sit, even if it's just for, 8 to 12 games, I think it matters, just because Justin Fields being comfortable in this offensive system and being able to, see the field and just kind of slow down and kind of reset his career a little bit. I think that's what he needs right now. His, ability to read coverage and all that type of stuff. I'm not here to get into all that, but he has a legitimate superpower in his running ability. And I think giving him time to kind of get comfortable in the offense, I think will raise the ceiling of what he can do paired with Arthur Smith in the long term.
Yeah. The move that actually accelerated the timeline on Pittsburgh and actually opened the door for getting Justin Fields actually happened yesterday. And what was kind of a bombshell, where the Steelers traded their 2022 first-round pick, Kenny Pickett, to the Philadelphia Eagles. That's what actually reopened the door for them getting Justin Fields. Because on Monday, when we talked last, I believe it was, we said, okay, is this going to be a quarterback competition between Russell Wilson and Kenny Pickett? That's what it was looking like. And even if it wasn't a competition and the Steelers were just going to frame it that way, we thought, okay, well, Russ, if he plays well and does well in training camp, he'll be the starter at least to start the season. And Kenny Pickett will be the backup. And maybe Kenny Pickett can learn and develop under Russell Wilson for a year. And if Russell doesn't pan out, you just go right back to Pickett and see if he can show you something in year 3. However, that's not the case. As I understand it from all the reporting, there was a report that actually came out back in week 17. It's right before their week 17 game against the Seattle Seahawks, right after that Bengals game, the first game that Mason Rudolph played and balled out in, if you guys remember, where the Steelers had originally told Kenny Pickett, once you get back healthy, you're going to start. But I think that Bengals game changed their thinking on that because they saw the way Mason played. I mean, that was probably the best game a Steelers quarterback has played since like Ben was still Ben. And they end up going back to Mason for that game in Seattle. And the report was Kenny Pickett did not react to that well, and he didn't receive the signing of Russell Wilson well. I guess there are always two sides to the story, right? The Steelers may have misled Kenny Pickett just a little bit because at the combine, Omar Khan said, we have full belief in Kenny Pickett. They told him multiple times that he was going to start. So I understand maybe some of the frustration on Pickett's side. And I do like Kenny Pickett, the person. And I'd like to see him succeed maybe somewhere else. I don't know if it's going to be in Philadelphia because they have their franchise guy, but if he can be like just a solid backup or maybe develop and go somewhere else, I want to see Kenny Pickett succeed. Don't get me wrong, but when you haven't been productive in the NFL, you've had moments, but when you haven't been consistently productive in the NFL, you don't get to act this way. You don't get to pick and choose where you play and when you want to play. That's not how this works. So
especially for an organization like the Steelers.
Exactly.
The standard is Super Bowls.
Exactly. And look, I mean, we can talk about Pickett. We can talk about that, all that stuff all day. But the point being, circling back around, is that what happened yesterday, accelerating Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh, getting a 3rd-round pick back from the Eagles for a guy who has been okay-ish, like not great in his NFL career so far. I guess the Eagles see something in him, and they're a very well-run organization, so I'm not going to question anything that they do. But to get a 3rd-round pick back for Kenny Pickett and to only have to give up a 6th-round pick for Justin Fields, and to have Justin Fields and Russell Wilson now in your quarterback room for a total of $4.5 million this year is ridiculous. It blows my mind. And look, as optimistic as I am right now as a Steelers fan, I'm not going to come on here and say that, the Steelers, they're now a contender in the AFC. They're going to be right up there with the Chiefs, whoever else, the Bengals, the Ravens, whoever else is contending in the AFC. But what you cannot tell me is that Justin Fields and Russell Wilson aren't an upgrade, a significant upgrade over what they have had, even though Mason Rudolph did perform well down the stretch. Because at the very least, if this goes wrong, if Russell Wilson doesn't pan out, and he is washed, if he is, you turn to Justin Fields, and maybe he becomes your long-term guy. And if that doesn't work out, well, hey, you don't have to pick up his 5th-year option, and you just start with a clean slate next season. Maybe you get to draft your long-term solution. So it's not that the Steelers can't lose out on these moves. Like, this might not work at all. Who knows? But it at the very least shows me as a Steelers fan that Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin are being proactive, trying to upgrade where they can. And I think that's going to continue. And that's good because Kyle Brandt mentioned this earlier this week on NFL Network after they brought in Russell Wilson. this has largely been a very underwhelming stretch of Steelers football over the past half decade plus. 7 years without winning a playoff game in Pittsburgh is an eternity. And that's not the standard. So good for Omar Khan and good for Mike Tomlin in the Steelers organization for doing things a little bit different and for being aggressive. Even if this stuff doesn't work out, sometimes you have to take risks. And the last thing I'll say on this is I think I want to take you back to a moment from Justin Fields' pro day. I believe this was his pro day, in an interaction that he had with the Steelers head coach, Mike Tomlin. I thought this was interesting. I saw this yesterday on Twitter, even before the trade happened. Here we go.
You know what we came to see. Give it to me, baby. I got you. Have a good day, man. Let's go. I will appreciate it.
So there you go. Tomlin and Fields interacting, having a nice exchange at Justin Fields' pro day. So it's come full circle now, and Justin Fields will be wearing the black and gold for this upcoming season, and I'm excited about it. I'm at least excited about what seems to be now the direction of this organization under Omar Khan.
Yeah, I can see it both ways. Like for the people that are saying like, oh, well, this is like a lateral move. Like I can see them going 9-8 or whatever in the next 2 years and then being in the same spot. Sure, like all of that is true, but I think this means more for Omar Khan and the confidence in Steelers fans in him more so than anything else. Like this is the most aggressive. I might be wrong on this, but from my memory, this is the most aggressive the Steelers have been in a while. So,
absolutely. And to those people, before I get to Matt's question, they might go 10-7. They might go 9-8 again because their schedule's not going to be easy, and the AFC is a gauntlet. But if the Russell Wilson acquisition or the Justin Fields acquisition gets them a playoff win, it maybe changes the way that we view the Steelers rather than just a one and done kind of middling team. Okay, like they got a winning record, but they got killed in the playoffs. If Russell Wilson, who's done it before, leads them to a playoff win, even if they do go 9-8, 10-7 again, it will feel different. Even if it doesn't work, I think that's the direction the Steelers are heading, and you can't really knock them for that. Now, for Matt's question, why don't you give your thoughts on this? Can you talk about the Diontae Johnson trade, which you already did a little bit, in the Steelers wide receiver depth, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
Well, for me personally, I didn't really like the trade. I thought, so did the trade happen before they got Russell Wilson or after? It happened after, right?
It happened, I believe. Yeah, it happened like on Thursday.
Yeah, I think having Diontae Johnson in the room, just without him, I just asked the question like, where are you getting the juice from right now? Like just short area quickness, like I guess just phone booth football. I just feel like Diontae Johnson, for all of his shortcomings and like in like the little details in terms of like blocking and all that kind of stuff. Like sure, that's all fair and true, but in terms of getting open, there's not a lot of guys that are better in terms of route running. And the point that I want to make is just a lot of people made the point that, Kenny Pickett never played in a non-Matt Canada offense. You can make the same argument for Diontae Johnson in terms of why he hasn't been as productive as maybe his talent suggests. So that'd be the reason that I maybe aren't as high on the move. But there are, receivers in the draft that I think would fill that hole. And the Steelers are a really good drafting team in terms of wide receivers. So George Pickens, Calvin Austin, Pat Freiermuth, they're certainly not the worst wide receiver core in the league, far from it. But I think they do need to maybe draft a couple of guys here, maybe pick up someone in free agency.
I didn't love the move either, but I understand it. Here's what I'll say. Deontay Johnson, really productive, even in the latter stages of Ben's career, where he was probably more productive than he has been the past couple years. But really productive player for Pittsburgh. Really good value for where the Steelers drafted him. And yes, I mean, he was the best route runner in Pittsburgh since Antonio Brown. It's not really even a conversation. And he does a lot of good things I really like at the wide receiver position. And I think he will do well with a quarterback like Bryce Young in Carolina. So hopefully maybe they extend him in Carolina or he gets a bigger deal somewhere else. Look, I don't love the compensation that we got for Deontay Johnson. I don't love just, flat out getting rid of him like that. But at least got a little bit of value. If Dante Jackson, who's kind of a vet corner in the league, ends up filling that cornerback 2 spot, that'll look a little bit better. Or at least if he plays a significant role in their defense and isn't terrible, it won't look as bad. And look, I trust over the past decade, I trust the Steelers' instincts on wide receivers. Got rid of Juju, hasn't been the same. Got rid of AB, that went downhill. Martavis Bryant, where's he been the past 5 years? I can go on and on, right? So I'm not saying that Deontay Johnson won't be successful. I think, if anything, he might end up being the most successful out of all those guys post-Pittsburgh, just because I think he's probably getting the most talented quarterback out of all those guys. Like when Antonio Brown left Pittsburgh, he went to the Raiders, I think, right? Before he ended up in Tampa Bay. And Juju went to play with Mac Jones, who has obviously fizzled out as of right now. So there's a lot to it. I don't love it, but I do trust the Steelers' instincts on wide receivers with their track record of drafting wide receivers. And I do think that they will go out and sign somebody, a Josh Reynolds type. Maybe, I know Mike Williams is out there, but I have concerns about him staying on the field. I could easily see a Tyler Boyd. He's a Pittsburgh native. We know Pittsburgh likes their hometown kids. I think there's a tie there. And I think he could come in to be like the wide receiver 3 behind Pickens and a guy that you draft. So sorry to be long-winded on the Steelers stuff, but I'm right there with you. I don't love it, but I understand it.
Yeah, no, you're good. Steelers episode coming soon, by the way. We're going to be doing a Steelers kind of, I guess, well, it was originally going to be pre-off season, but we're going to pivot on that and do a Steelers episode here pretty soon. Anyways.
We're going to tweak it. We're going to tweak the Steelers episode because all this has happened, and we'll go deeper on the quarterback stuff and all the other moves. There are probably more moves coming here in the next couple of days. But Mike Tomlin wrote a song, and I wanted you guys to hear it. All right.
Listen to the song I just wrote. It's called I Hate You Guys. I hate you guys. You guys are assholes. Especially Kenny. I hate him nuts.
All right. Now we can move on.
Bro, I did not expect that. We're okay. Yeah.
So our next move is going to be hopefully you guys enjoyed Mike Tomlin's song. I didn't know he had that talent as a singer. Maybe that can be his post-coaching career gig. Keenan Allen to Chicago. Your thoughts?
I love it, dude. I mean, the Chargers weren't going to pay him. He wasn't willing to take the pay cut. The Bears go and snatch him up for a 4th-round pick. I mean, that's big time, man. And then it also opens up their ability to look at something other than wide receiver at that 9 slot.
Yes.
I think you can still look at wide receiver if one of the top 3 guys falls to you. But, a possibility of a Jared Verse or Dallas Turner or even trading down, getting more assets, and then getting CB1 or CB2. I mean, it's a home run, man. I mean, this is probably one of the best moves in the entirety of free agency in terms of, you know, boom for your buck. I said that saying wrong, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Bang,
the
bang for your buck is the saying.
bang for your buck is correct. I mean, Keenan Allen, there's really not a whole lot you could say other than in 2023 had 1,250 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, and an 86.3 Pro Football Focus grade, graded out really well in a lot of categories. It has been just the ultimate penalty. Like, he's been what you think about when you think about a pro, a legitimate pro at the wide receiver position in the NFL. Produces. He's a veteran in that room. Another target for Caleb Williams, who now we are like 100% sure, unless something comes up in the draft process, they're going to pick at number 1. You pair Keenan Allen and DJ Moore with DeAndre Swift in the backfield and Cole Kmet at tight end with Caleb Williams at quarterback. I actually kind of like the Chicago Bears offense. We'll see where this goes, but yeah, I mean, what'd they give up? A 4th-round pick, I think it was.
Yeah.
That's pretty much nothing. And Keenan Allen, I don't know how much he has left, like how much longer he's going to play, especially with the way maybe his body's kind of been banged up. But it is a fresh start in Chicago. And look, I mean, he's going to make whoever that rookie quarterback is, Caleb Williams, better immediately. Because he's just that good of a wide receiver. I'd give this move for the Bears an A-. I really like it.
Yeah, imagine this scenario. Just throwing this out there. Imagine the Bears trade down from 9 to like 15 or something and get Brock Bowers. That would be disgusting. That would be absolutely disgusting. And I low-key want that to happen.
Yeah, it's just I'd be disgusted if the NFL lets Brock Bowers drop that low.
True.
But hey, I mean, the other point is you have to consider this opens up. I think both mock drafts we did at number 9, we had the Bears taking a wide receiver, and now you could still go that route, but it's not a pressing need anymore.
Yeah, no,
it's just not. And there are good receivers you can probably get if you want to add another guy to the room. Great, you can get them in the 2nd round. You could probably even find some good receivers in the third. Like, this is a wide receiver's heaven for this particular draft. So I really liked it. There's little to no risk. I don't know how many years are left on this contract. I think it's 1, maybe 2. I don't know. But I like this offense now with DeAndre Swift, who's a really productive back, and these 2 really productive receivers. And you're going to probably upgrade at the quarterback position. I think Caleb Williams will probably be an upgrade from Justin Fields. If, his draft profile translates to the league, which I think it will. So good for the Bears making a big move.
Yeah. Huge. Next move I think we had on the list was Tyron Smith, I think.
Yeah. You're the Cowboys fan, so why don't you talk about Tyron Smith going to the Jets?
Yeah. I'll be brief with this, man. Like, to be as like just flat out as possible, losing Tyron Smith fucking hurts. Like, especially after, all this talk about going all in and doing the Rams blueprint and trading picks and trying to, have that vision and just like trying to, go all in and try to win a Super Bowl. In reality, the actual approach they took is probably going to be better off for us in the long term, just because CeeDee Lamb is in the pipeline, Micah Parsons in the pipeline. Micah Parsons, there's been talk around, in league circles I've heard, that Micah Parsons could make $40 million a year and reset the entire defensive market. So from that standpoint, I mean, I think being a little bit less aggressive in terms of bringing guys back, and then kind of having a I guess transition year in terms of the window. I think for now it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't feel good. Now for the Jets side of things, I mean, it's a win, man. Like Tyron Smith, when he's healthy, is still one of the best tackles in football. He's only 33 years old. Like I think for some reason in my mind he was older than that for some reason because he's been on the Cowboys for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
All those good Tony Romo teams. Tyron Smith was a big part of those, obviously, with those great offensive lines.
Yep.
And he's only 33, 34 years old. You put him in front of Aaron Rodgers, and I mean, you probably aren't, super satisfied with the depth as of right now, but that can be addressed later on in the draft. So it's a win now move for the Jets, as to be expected. And it was more than necessary. Like this offensive line needed it in the worst way.
Yeah, but Aaron Rodgers coming back off the Achilles injury, you had to upgrade the offensive line. And he probably still can make a couple more moves to just acquire more talent or depth in the draft, which I think they probably will because they seem set on doing it because not only did they get Tyron Smith at $6.5 million guaranteed, they also brought in John Simpson at $6 million per year and Morgan Moses, another tackle, at $5.5 million. So I think for those three guys, for this offensive line, you plug those three guys into this offensive line. I think it upgrades you in the short term, but to get those three guys for less than $20 million combined in this offensive line market, where there's kind of, I don't want to say a scarcity, but it's hard to find good offensive linemen. And when you do find them, they often come at a pretty penny. So I think the Jets have done a good job upgrading their offensive line. So it'll be interesting to see where they go in the draft, but you needed some veterans to come in and kind of shore things up with Aaron Rodgers coming off a major injury later on in his career.
Yeah, I think before we move on from the Jets, the underrated move that I really like for them is signing Tyrod Taylor. Just getting, a veteran in at backup is probably the move that they should have made last year, which goes without saying, but it's still well overdue. Still so necessary.
Yeah, I think Tyron Smith, according to what I'm seeing, was the number one rated pass protector of any offensive lineman by Pro Football Focus in 2024. So,
oh, sorry, did I say Tyron Smith? I thought I said Tyrod Taylor. Sorry, my bad.
You did. I'm just
Okay.
talking. I'm just talking about the thing I just saw on Twitter. I don't know if that's
Okay,
true.
okay,
But,
yeah. My bad.
yeah, I mean, Tyrod Taylor, experienced veteran backup to Aaron Rodgers. I like the move as well. Okay, our next move is it comes on the defensive line. DJ Reader going to the Detroit Lions. Did you happen to see the details on this, or are you not sure?
The details were being held from us for a long time, and then I never ended up seeing what the details ended up being. It was, I think, 4 or 5 hours after the signing. I kept on trying to check Twitter for it.
Give your thoughts,
still
and
wasn't up, but-
give your thoughts, and then I'll search for the details.
Yeah. I mean, best defensive tackle available by far. I mean, we all know what he can do as obviously a run stuffer, but really good as a pass rusher as well. And I think the underrated part of this is you're pairing him with Aleem McNeil, which is going to be nasty. I think Aleem McNeil was injured for a part of last year, so a lot of people forget about how good he is. but he's a D tackle for the Lions that's like, I think he's the next like breakout guy in terms of D tackles. Like I think what Derek Brown did this year for the Panthers, I think I could see Aleem McNeil doing something similar next year, and like breaking out into that tier of superstardom. So having those three guys on your defensive line, I think it just, I mean, you're raising your floor. Like one of those guys gets hurt, you'll be fine, and it's like it's a no brainer if you're the Lions. Obviously, like he fits the culture, he fits what Dan Campbell wants to do. They were already really good at stopping the run, and it might even be even better this year with another year of Jack Campbell in terms of experience. I mean, I love the move, man. There's nothing really to say other than that. I feel like it's just kind of being underrated right now. I just don't see that many people talking about it.
Yeah, it did go under the radar with everything else going on. The quarterback carousel, and some of the other moves that went on. But DJ Reader, we've talked about him a lot on this podcast before. He goes to the Lions, and it is a 2-year deal worth up to $27 million, as I understand it. So really good value, but only $9 million in guarantees. So it's not like it's a major cap hit. It's a really, I think, team-friendly deal for a player that he's an 8-year veteran. He's long been considered by us and I think the most NFL people as one of the league's best run stuffers at a premium position where there's not a whole lot of elite players in today's NFL.
Yeah.
He, I think, is a quietly steady contributor in crushing the pocket in pass rush. His sack numbers aren't necessarily what I would call gaudy, but in each of the past 3 years, he's generated at least 32 quarterback pressures for the Cincinnati Bengals. And so you're going to get a guy that is going to affect teams in the passing game and stuff the run. And this is an upgrade, major upgrade over what they've had in Detroit on the defensive line. And to just plug DJ Reader in the middle of that defense when you have these edge rushers now, like Aiden Hutchinson and everyone else, I really like what Dan Campbell in this organization continues to do. And now that you have Jordan Love in that Packers offense in your division, it is important to have the requisite weapons on the defensive side to counteract that. And if you can get him on good value, still really productive, like it's not like he's aging or he's washed or anything, do it. Smart, underrated. It shouldn't be underrated, but it is. It's just the way that it kind of has been. So once again, I hate to kind of be the Detroit Lions apologist here, but love this move for Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, very quietly, man. I mean, Detroit traded for Carlton Davis to be on the outside, be their corner, number one corner. And very quietly, man, I think you could make the argument that the Lions are the favorites in the NFC for next year, as it stands right now.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for Lions fans. I'm excited to see what they do in the draft because right now they're in a really good spot that we see like very few teams in where they could literally go for anything, just get best player available. And that's like such a luxury.
When you have a top 5 roster in the league, which I'd argue they have, with the additions that they made in last year's draft class, which has been just fantastic. A large reason they were able to get as far as they did in 2023. That's what it allows you to do. Just kind of go best player available kind of approach. And with the past 2 years of how they've drafted under this regime, you kind of have to maybe give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in the way that they're going to approach this draft. A lot of people questioned the Jahmyr Gibbs pick at number 6 last year and how that worked out. So I think You have a great tight end. I like your receivers, although you're going to have to replace. I think they have a spot open, given that Josh Reynolds is a free agent. Maybe they bring him back. Who knows?
Yeah, sneaky wide receiver spot in the draft as well.
But yeah, I mean, great move, Lions. Like, you've totally changed the way in a span of 18 months that the way that people think of the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
You've gone from a poorly run organization to a really well run organization, at least here in the past 2 years. So let's move
And
on.
they didn't have to sign a sex offender to do it. Browns.
Yeah. No, they didn't. Oh, it's amazing how that works.
Sorry, had to throw the shade there. Had to.
It's amazing how that works, isn't it? You can fix your football team without doing that.
Yeah.
Calvin Ridley. This surprised me. Calvin Ridley to the Titans. Now the deal, it's 4 years, $92 million. It is a lofty deal, and I hear a lot of people talking about how this could be an overpay. But your thoughts on the way that Calvin Ridley fits into this offense, some of the other moves the Titans have made, they have been kind of active quietly in free agency. Your thoughts on Ridley to Tennessee?
Well, I think there's outs after the second or third year. So that's worth noting when talking about this deal. And it also allows them to move Treylon Burks back to the slot, which is where he's most comfortable, in my opinion. From just watching him at Arkansas and where he's most effective, I think he's most effective in the slot. So that trio of wide receivers, Hopkins, Ridley, and Burks, I think you could do a lot worse than that. I mean, it's the same approach as what you're seeing with the Panthers. You're going and you're trying to see what you have in your young, second-year quarterback, seeing what you have, trying to, figure out whether he's your guy going into year 3, because there's just so much power in just knowing. Like, now you can, criticize some of this, like the money all you want, but to me, I think you're getting one of the best number 2 receivers in football, and at that number, I can live with that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, give credit to Calvin Ridley. We know he knows how to bet. He bet on himself, and he landed a major deal.
Bet on the NFL as well.
$18 million per year. It is only $50 million guaranteed. So when you look at it that way, I like it a lot more. I don't know the details of an opt-out. I haven't seen it. Maybe there is. If that's the case, I like it even more. Very productive player in the NFL. He is actually going to be, this kind of surprised me, 29 years old when the season starts. So this deal will take him into his 30s. And he has had some injuries and off-the-field issues, but he upgrades this offense, no question about it. And if you're the Titans, you're looking for weapons for Will Levis. We saw the flashes of what Will Levis can be. Look, this doesn't solve your issues on the offensive line. It doesn't solve a whole lot of your issues on defense and in the secondary. But you upgraded your football team, no question about it. And I do like Hopkins, Ridley, and Burks. I think you are absolutely spot on with that. Moving Treylon Burks back to the slot, I think, is what fits him the best. And so I'm interested to see what the Titans do in the draft. I think they will.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The underrated part about them hiring Brian Callahan is the fact that they also bring in Bill Callahan, who's like consensus the best offensive line coach in football. So their approach could be to just try and, upgrade from within in terms of just development, and then maybe draft like one guy in like the second or third round, or they could just go all in and take a guy in the top 10. So it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I do have to give some more credit to the Titans, given that they did, I think, bring in Lloyd Cushenberry
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
Denver Broncos, who good. You can plug him in at the center. And given that there is probably a scarcity of really good high-end centers in the draft, I really like that move. He was a guy I actually kind of wanted in Pittsburgh, but whatever. I like that. I think they've made a couple other moves. I can't remember off the top of my head, but hey, I mean, you get a new head coach, and he's being aggressive. I like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. This could take us a little bit, like the next 10 minutes, but maybe not. The Rams. There's a lot here. We have to start though with by far the biggest news, which was Aaron Donald announcing his retirement. So you have the floor.
I mean, 8 All-Pros in, I think it was 8 seasons in a row from his second year onward. I mean, that really says it all right there. And then on top of that, the Super Bowl ring, of course, and then obviously him having the, game sealing play in the Super Bowl on top of all that. I mean, what more is there to really say? I mean, he's clutch. He's he's been productive every single year of his career from rookie year onward. I mean, coming in like undersized like he was, there was like people forget that there was like questions about whether he was, gonna be able to survive in the NFL just in general. Like people kind of thought he was a tweener in terms of him being a D tackle or a D end. And that's insane to think about in hindsight. So
Yeah, he is first ballot Hall of Fame, no question about it. He's one of the best defensive linemen in NFL history. Like he's right up there with the Reggie Whites, those kind of elite players who are remembered as the most dominant forces in NFL history. He's up there with those guys. He is the highest graded player in Pro Football Focus history, 97.3. The highest graded defensive player, that is. It's not particularly close. You look at his accolades, they speak for themselves. 8-time first team All-Pro. What is he? A 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. A Super Bowl champion. And in that Super Bowl against Cincinnati, he made like the key quarterback hit to close that game out. You talked about him being clutch. If you want to know about Aaron Donald and who he was as a player, if you didn't watch him maybe as much as you would have liked, just go watch the video of Geno Smith being pressured by Aaron Donald. It's hilarious, and it just speaks to who Aaron Donald was as a player. He's a great person off the field, but I mean, he was a badass on the field. It kind of sucks to see him retire, but at the same time, I think it comes at a good time. And now we'll kind of transition into the Rams as an organization. They are sneakily been one of the better, well-run organizations here in the past year and a half. The moves that they made, the way that they've drafted, even though they kind of have a lack of draft capital. Where do we start here? Like, obviously, they hit big on Puka Nacua. They've hit big on a couple other young players. Where do we start? Where do you want to go with this?
I mean, first and foremost, man, I think them signing Dotson and then the other guard they signed, it wasn't John Runyon. I'm having trouble remembering what his name actually was, but they went out and signed 2 guards in free agency to shore up that offensive line. But I think Sean McVay is a fucking genius, man. Like they're gonna run 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers, with 3 of the best blocking wide receivers in football, Oh, it was Jonah Jackson. That's what his name was, from the Lions. They're going to run 11 personnel and then have one of the just biggest interior O lines in terms of just sheer size in the entire NFL. And I think they're just going to play power football, man, with Kyron Williams, and that's going to be fun to watch, man. Like, they're positioning themselves really well here to have a resurgence. Like, I'm really excited to see what they do in the draft here, because this is the first round pick they've had in a long time, and they have a chance to really put themselves in the NFC mix, like, legitimately.
Yeah, you look at some of the moves that they've made. Re-signed Kevin Dotson. Know a lot about him. Started his career in Pittsburgh. He's been a good, solid piece for them at guard. They bring in Jonah Jackson, who at the very least is a very solid veteran, B-plus kind of player. I think that was an A signing. I really like the move to pick up. It's kind of more underrated to pick up Colby Parkinson. I think he'll fare well coming over from Seattle in this offense with Stafford as his quarterback.
Yeah.
And then they bring back Darius Williams in their secondary, along with getting Cam Curl from the Washington Commanders on a very, very affordable contract to upgrade their secondary. They still have holes. I'm interested to see what they do in the draft, but I think they could still use some edge help. I think their secondary is probably still lacking a true number one corner. They probably could use some linebacker help, but hey, they're a very well run organization. And when you have Cooper Kupp, you have Matthew Stafford, you upgrade your offensive line, and you have Puka Nacua with Sean McVay. I like what they're doing. You also have kind of an insurance policy now for if Matthew Stafford does get banged up in Jimmy Garoppolo, who at the very least can get you out of a stadium. Like if he needs to come in for like a 2 or 3 week time period, you can survive that.
Yeah.
And I think Jimmy G will do well if he does have to play, as long as he's healthy, in kind of Sean McVay's system, where Sean McVay can kind of scheme some things up for him. So, like everything that the Rams are doing, I want to see where they go in the draft.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. I'm just saying, Sean McVay, I'm putting out there, man. If we're, polling, early coach of the year stuff, I mean, this sounds stupid now that I'm thinking about it. Now I'm saying it out loud, but I could see a world where the Rams win like 12 or 13 games. Like I can see it.
Yeah, the division's not easy. I expect Seattle to be competitive again. Expect San Francisco to be competitive again. But hey, yeah, I mean, we sometimes we struggle to think about like who are the competitors, who are the real Super Bowl contenders in the NFC right now. And we talk about Dallas, we of course talk about Philadelphia and San Francisco. We've kind of been waiting for another team to enter into the equation. But now you think about the NFC, think about the Rams with Stafford and what seems to be an upgraded roster, continue to be proactive and trying to get better. And you think about Atlanta now in a fairly manageable division with a significant upgrade at quarterback and Kirk Cousins. You think about Dallas, you think about some of these other teams in the NFC. It's not as weak of a conference as you think it is, as some people think it is.
And the good news for the Rams, too, is out of all the teams you mentioned, the Rams, obviously they're way younger now than the team that won the Super Bowl and all that, but the Rams are the only team that have actually done it, and that matters.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Okay, we'll wrap this thing up with our last. Actually, we need to talk about 2 more moves. Let's get to the first one. Hollywood Brown. This went under the radar.
Oh, yeah.
Hollywood Brown to Kansas City. I know you had some thoughts on this, so why don't you get us started?
Yeah, you threw this move out there as a potential move to talk about for the pod, And for some reason, this one flew right over my head. Like I didn't see this move happen live, but man, I'm so glad you brought it up because the pairing of him and Patrick Mahomes, I mean, that's legit, man. I don't know what this will mean for some of their number 2 guys who kind of are in that kind of same mold as like, undersized speed, route running technician wide receivers, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney. I don't know what it'll mean for them, but just in terms of picking up a wide receiver, filling a need, I mean, dare I say, Marquise Brown is probably the best receiver they've had since Tyreek Hill. Is that a hot take?
I don't think so. Look, this obviously kind of frees up what they could potentially do at number 32. A lot of people had them taking whatever the receiver was that was available at that position. It was a weak spot last year, no question about it. But even if, here's what I'll say. Even if you come to pick 32, you come to the end of the first round and say Xavier Worthy is still there, I'm not going to say I'm not going to tell you they're going to take him. This probably lessens the likeliness that they will. But when you have Patrick Mahomes, number 15, as your quarterback, it doesn't really matter what you do. Like, he is the ultimate. If he's on the field, this team will be favored to win the Super Bowl, as they should be. And there's really no argument against it. And now you bring in Hollywood Brown, who's really, really productive as a football player. Has had his ups and downs, yes, but pairing with Patrick Mahomes, this offense with the other receiver that came on at the end of this year, for whatever reason, I can't think of his name.
Gosh, I can't remember either.
Travis Kelce. They have some good backs. Get him in an Andy Reid offense. I mean, this is absolutely underrated. 1 year, $7 million. Are you kidding me? Yeah, love it.
Yeah,
absolutely love it.
Home run.
Last move we kind of forgot about. I wanted to touch on DeMeco Ryans with the Texans brings in Danielle Hunter from the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
To pair with Will Anderson at that pass rush position. Your thoughts on that move?
I mean, he's trying to build 49ers East, basically. I mean, in terms of a pass rush duo, man, I mean, Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter, Samson Ebukam, Nick Bosa from when DeMeco was there in San Francisco. You're working with something there, man. That's legit. Now it's, $49 million of the $50 million is guaranteed. So obviously the Vikings weren't willing to do that and the Texans jumped all over it. But, whether he stays healthy for all of it or not, just as long as you can, have them healthy for the home stretches of the season, for when you need to make a playoff push and, into the postseason, that's when this team is going to be really scary, man. Because I feel confident that they're going to be in the postseason as long as CJ Stroud is healthy. I think CJ Stroud will get them there regardless. Now, obviously the AFC is tough and all that. That's all, fair and true. But we know how good CJ Stroud is. He's proven that. And now that defense, Will Anderson Jr., Neil Hunter, and now you bring in Al-Shaair from the Titans. I mean, look out, man. I mean, you got Derek Stingley Jr. People forget about him, but last year, the second half of the year, he was one of the best corners in football, in my opinion. So I think this defense might jump up to being, a sneaky top 10 unit, barring a few moves in the draft maybe.
You had the quarterback. you have the weapons. You bring in a guy like Joe Mixon, who I really, really like, on a affordable contract, still a productive player. You're going to get Tank Dell back, who they didn't have for that playoff run last year. I like a lot of some of the other receivers that came on. You still have Dalton Schultz, if I'm not mistaken, at the tight end position. You in this defense, like what you look for in a head coach is they have to be really, really good, maybe even elite on their side of the ball. Like that's what you want them to be. And D'Amico Ryans is obviously that on the defensive side. And you see it. You did lose Jonathan Grenard, really solid young player, but you replace him with Daniil Hunter, who since 2021 has 181 quarterback pressures and 33 sacks with an 88 PFF grade. I mean, he's been one of the best, most productive, consistently productive players on the defensive front in the NFL. And I like the contract. Like it's 2 years, 49 million, 48 million of which is guaranteed. But there is 21 million of that that's converted into a signing bonus. So once he signed, he got 21 million. So the cap hit isn't as large as you might think on this year's cap. I think it's only like 8 million on this year's cap. So they still, I think, probably have some flexibility to go out and add other players. And they have been active in doing so. I can't remember all of the moves off the top of my head, but I do know Joe Mixon. I do know that they brought back Dalton Schultz, and they've made a couple other underrated kind of moves that I like, including Al Shire, who D'Amico Ryans, if I'm not mistaken, is very familiar with from San Francisco.
Yep.
So really, really like what the Texans are doing. They're going to be hard. They're going to be a hard out in the playoffs. They're going to get there for sure as long as the quarterback's healthy. And yeah, I mean, what else can you really say? I think they brought in a backup quarterback. If I'm trying to think.
It wasn't Flacco. It was one of those veteran guys, I think.
There have been so many quarterback moves. I can't remember exactly, but they did bring in a backup. One more move came to my mind just quickly. Seattle's had an interesting offseason. They bring in Jerome Baker from the Dolphins at linebacker to replace Bobby Wagner, who went to Washington. 1 year, $7 million. It's been a productive player. I like it personally for their defense. I think the head coach knows what he's doing, Mike McDonald, on that side of the ball. But they also traded for Sam Howell. Kenny Pickett wasn't the only player in the 2022 draft class to get dealt. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in terms of their linebacker move for Baker, they needed a linebacker, and I think he was probably one of the top linebackers available at that point. I think they waited a few days to end up making the move and try to make it a discounted deal because they don't have a ton of cap space.
Right.
But I think it's a good move. Baker's a good player, so I'll leave it at that. Sam Howell, I mean, I don't know what to think about that, man. I if I'm being entirely honest, I would be very surprised if they don't draft someone the year after this year. Not this year, but the year after this one. I just don't think. Obviously, they did give up, some decent capital. Like they gave up a fourth, which I was a little bit surprised about. But I don't know. I don't see Howell being their guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't either. It's just an interesting move. I didn't expect it to happen.
Yeah. Came out of nowhere.
At the very least, like he now has some experience. He's young. And if Geno Smith is banged up, Mike can get you out of the stadium with their weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, their run game, their receivers. It don't love kind of going that high to get him. I don't know how this kind of worked out, but we'll see what happens. I do like the linebacker move. They did lose Jordan Brooks as well, so that also accelerated kind of their need for a linebacker. And they get one at a good price, like 1 year, $7 million. If he doesn't pan out, he's gone next year. And so I Seattle at what are they, 15 or 16 in the draft? Like where do they go there? Well, that'll be interesting. Obviously, they figured out their tackle situation, or they think they have. So I'm interested to see what they do. As always, as I am with every team, basically. Anything else? We did go at hour 20, but it needed to go that.
Yeah. I mean, this is the bread and butter, man. This is, I mean, talking football is why we started the podcast to begin with. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this was super fun. I mean, obviously, the groundbreaker move of the century was the Cowboys re-signing their long snapper. Obviously, we couldn't go this podcast without mentioning that. That was huge. That was huge for the
They
program.
did make a move though. They did get who'd they get? They
Eric
got,
Kendricks.
Eric Kendricks. Do you like that,
Yeah.
or
I
don't really care?
I don't hate it. He's one of the smartest players in the NFL. I just don't know if he's the same physically as he used to be. But we needed a linebacker, so it's an upgrade regardless.
Okay, so Matt, who I know, we already answered this question, but what I wanted to say is, you're a Cowboys fan, Matt. Emmy's a major Cowboys fan, just like yourself. So
Yeah.
we are going to have eventually a Cowboys episode, an episode of this podcast where we just talk about the Cowboys, and that is it. We're going to do the same thing for Pittsburgh, of course, as Emmy mentioned, but tune in for that because that's where you can go further into your feelings and stuff. But I think that wraps it up for tonight. This was good. We needed this.
Yeah.
We talked about this. Anything else?
I just want to say to the 5 of y'all that are in here, I don't know what Michael did to bribe y'all, but just kidding. But yeah, we appreciate you staying for the full thing. That really does mean a lot to us. Just as a reminder, like if you aren't subscribed yet, subscribe because we're trying to get to 100 subscribers, hopefully by the end of this year. That's the goal. What else? Also, if you have any suggestions for how to improve the podcast, like I know this Restream, the tool we use to do the split screen thing, like they have like background music and all that kind of stuff. Like I don't know if that'd be something that y'all be interested in us adding to the podcast. I don't know if that's something that would make it better or not. But if y'all think it would be worth doing, then I guess just leave your thoughts down below and we'll implement it.
Yeah, absolutely. We greatly appreciate feedback. And if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Crazy week of free agency so far. I'm assuming this will continue into this upcoming week. But obviously, this upcoming week and kind of down the stretch here in March, we're going to have some bigger fish, not bigger fish to fry, but we're going to have other fish to fry in terms of March Madness, spring football for the Longhorns. NBA is still running hot right now. We're going to have to get in our baseball preview pretty swiftly as well. So we do have a lot of other fish to fry. We're busy here on the Raw Prospect Podcast. But make sure you check everything out. And you can find most of our content on our Twitter feed, or if you go to our YouTube channel, go to the live section because we do pretty much everything live. Also, check out our Patreon. It's down there. You see it at the bottom of your screen right now. Patreon.com/Raw Prospect Pod.
Yep.
Anything else? If not, we can just go ahead and sign off.
Yeah. I think that's it.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Listen to the song I just wrote. It's called I Hate You Guys.